Does architectural drawing still matter? So before I give you my answer, it's important to define what I mean by architectural drawing. So in this video, I will be referring to drawing as any type of illustration that is representing architectural elevation, plan, or section, and perhaps even a 3D that has some sort of line drawing, and it uses either lines or vectors to represent this drawing. And it doesn't matter if it's a traditional or analog drawing, because the same principles will apply to both. And I'm not going to be talking about sketches in these examples, because sketches are a bit like handwriting, just because you know how to use typewriter doesn't mean that you have to stop learning how to write by hand. And I think there's fundamentally 5 reasons why architectural drawing is not going to go anywhere. So number 1 is the speed. In architectural drawing, you don't have to finish the whole thing, the whole design, before you can draw anything. For example, if you have a plan to draw, you can draw that independent of what's happening above at the roof level. Whereas in the 3D modeling, for example, you need to rely a bit more on having the whole thing kind of figured out and resolved and put together. Also, the changes are quite quick because, for example, if you need to change a roof slope on your elevation, you can do that quite effortlessly. Whereas in the 3D modeling, there's a bit more friction before, you open the file and try to figure out what's the best way to change the geometry of the roof. And this leads me to the second point, which is the creativity. Now, in my view, the faster you can move with your drawings, the more creativity it allows, because it kind of gives you an opportunity to test a whole bunch of options before deciding on the right one. Also, when it comes to iterations, when you have a printed article in front of you, whether it's elevation, a section, or a plan, you can just, put the tracing paper over it and you can retrace the whole thing with those changes that you have in mind. So number 3 is the anatomy. Now, this is something I heard in the School of Architecture, and it was a really interesting way how the professor was talking about the orthographic projection. And what they said is basically that, every time you take a section or you have the elevation of the building, it allows you to see the whole kind of building, the whole design in one single piece. And it's very much similar to how, the surgical or analytical drawings of the body are made. Sounds a bit gross, but it's similar in the architecture. When you have the whole cut of the building, it really gives you unprecedented view on the building. It has that ability to see the whole thing in one glance. Okay, so number 4 is the legibility, and legibility really boils down to a couple of things. Number 1 is the line weights, and number 2 is the number of lines in the drawing. So there's a really a subtle art to it, but what it comes down to is an ability to show the important bits in our drawing. So again, analogy of writing comes handy. With the line weights, I think it's a bit like choosing a font and a spacing. And the better the font is and the more organized the spaces are, the more legible your text becomes. And with the number of lines, it's more about the choice of words in that Word document, in that manuscript, that dictates how easy it is to read the whole text. So number 5 is the elegance. And by elegance, I mean that the drawing has an ability to become an art piece in its own right. And this can be achieved through the variation of the line types and different means of graphical expression. And it just means that, compared to a traditional, conventional 3D rendering, the drawing can stand out in its own right. And, actually, because there's so much renderings around us these days, that it used to be the other way around, that the rendering would make the proposal stand out. But I think now there is actually an opportunity to use drawing a bit more to sell the building and to have that kind of wow effect, because good drawings are done really rarely these days, in my opinion. I think the most important thing about drawings is that it brings the clarity to the proposal. If you can express something in the smallest amount of lines, then I think it's amazing, because from the point of view of a viewer, it will make their life much easier to actually read and understand the proposal. I think what tends to happen in practice these days with Revit and all the 3D modeling software is that the art of keeping the lines to the minimum is kind of lost, because, the computer kind of just spits out these drawings that are way too complicated for, what they're intended. The second thing is that the selection of tools these days makes it possible to produce really good quality drawings. And I think that's a really good thing, because it makes, the whole profession a bit more accessible. And I think in the old days, it used to be more about the talent, and eventually, thanks to the modern tools, this becomes less of an issue. But I think still, even if you use AutoCAD or Revit or, Photoshop or anything else, the same timeless principles of the drawings still apply. And if you'd like to learn more about how to draw like an architect, then check out this video over here. And also, I made this other playlist over here that goes through the videos that I made on my channel about the drawings. So check those videos out, and I'll see you on the other side.